right. We'll get this stream going in just a second here. Looks like we're lagging behind just a little bit. Just making some minor edits and changes, and we're about to get going. All right. And I apologize if there's any weird sounds in the background. My dog is extremely thirsty for some reason tonight, and she's drinking a lot of water. So that's what's going on in the background. So we are here tonight. It's a pretty chilly night here. I got my coffee. Hopefully everyone out there has their coffee. We had a snow day today, which was pretty cool. I got about a foot of snow here in Colorado. So I've been stuck inside doing some videos. Just finished a Nikon Z6 versus Panasonic GH5 video. That'll be going out Sunday morning, and I have a photo challenge video I'm working on and a couple other things in the works. So I'm going to get some of this going here. And I apologize, my computer is lagging a little bit, so if the quality isn't that great, I apologize. Hopefully the audio quality is good, because again, I'm using my new microphone, and hopefully that's working out well. So since it's only 9:01, I'll give some people a couple more minutes to get going and jump in here real quick. I'll kind of get some stuff going in Lightroom as we wait. And I'll give some more people about 2 or 3 minutes to jump in this stream. And then we'll, like I said, hop over into Lightroom and start editing some of these military images of mine. And again, feel free, if you're here, drop any sort of comments or questions you have over into the chat, and I will do my best to answer those as quickly as possible as we're going here. So yeah. Like I said, we'll kind of get rolling here in about 2 minutes. Just want to give everybody a chance to get in the chat. So like I said before, we got a lot of snow here. I got snowed in today. I got about 8 inches of snow. It snowed all night, and it snowed pretty much all day. I was going to go skiing today, snowboarding, and ended up sleeping in a little bit. And then on top of that, once I woke up and got everything ready to go, my car was snowed in my apartment complex, so I kind of just got stuck here and didn't really get to go anywhere today. So that was pretty much my day. Scrounged around some old hard drives, got some of these photos together for this live stream, and threw them in Lightroom and kind of got everything prepped for that. So that was kind of my day. Not that interesting of a weekend. If the weather's a little bit better tomorrow, hopefully I can go out. I plan on doing some time lapses and some time-lapse stuff, drone stuff, Ronin stuff, kind of fun things like that up in the mountains tomorrow. So that will hopefully be some pretty cool video. And I'm probably going to do some sort of landscape tutorial or shoot something like that pretty soon. But I think it is about time to get going. Let's open up Lightroom here. Sorry, I got to answer a couple text messages real quick from some friends that are apologizing for not being able to come to the stream, which is cool. All right. So let me switch over to Lightroom real quick. And again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop those down below. So we're going to transition over here. All right, into Lightroom. And there goes my heater. Hopefully that's not too annoying. But I imported, I imported 64 photos. Some of them are duplicates and doubles, just kind of from my time at my last duty station. And I know there's a lot of people that were asking to see more of my military-related imagery, and essentially that is how this channel got started. That's what kind of the premise of why I started this channel is. I wanted to take my experience that I learned in the military, and I wanted to share that with as many people as I could. And I got super lucky that I became a military photographer. I had originally wanted to do a couple other different jobs in the Air Force when I joined. One of them was a helicopter gunner, and the other one was a MP, military police security forces. And then the other one was a helicopter mechanic. So those were kind of my top jobs. And when I went through boot camp, those jobs ended up not being available at the time for like the training school. They didn't have enough slots available. So they ended up looking through my paperwork and found out that I was really into photography, and they said, hey, one of the recruiters said, we can get you into a photography slot. Or it was actually one of the job counselors, because I was about most of the way through boot camp. And they said, hey, we can get you in as a photographer if you're interested in doing that. And I jumped right in on that because I thought that would be awesome. So here's just my little thumbnail I made for this. And I'll go through. I will do some basic photo editing, and I want to show you guys kind of how I would quickly edit photos for the military, because we had extremely strict rules as military photographers. And I said had, still have, because I'm still in, but we have very strict rules on what we can edit. And I actually have a document up here. And this document, if you can see the title here, is called DODI 504002. And that stands for Department of Defense instruction. So the Department of Defense, or the Pentagon, puts together these rules essentially for how we're allowed to edit our photos. And I just brought this up because as we go through for the first round of editing, I'm going to show you guys how I would edit for a military released photo. And then I'll go in and I'll do some retouching and some things how I want the photo to look that I wouldn't necessarily release as a military image on official sites as like a newsworthy photo, because we have rules of how we are allowed to edit our photos. If I were to put this on, an Air Force website or an Air Force Facebook page or Instagram. So here are essentially the rules. They're pretty darn strict. We're not allowed to go in, and we're not allowed to, you can see prohibited alteration. So I can't add things to the image or take away things from the image. So for example, I cannot use clone stamping for my job. Unrealistic changing of light, not allowed to do that. I'm really allowed to do what it says right here, basic editing corrective techniques. So that means dodging and burning, getting your white balance correct, and removing dust, noise, doing some sharpening, and adding basic contrast. So any crazy enhancements or modifications, I'm not allowed to do. I can crop my image, I can add contrast, and I can essentially do what it takes to make my raw image look the way it looked in real life. So when you see, military-related imagery, sometimes it can be kind of dull, kind of bland. It's because I can't go in there. I cannot add, extra helicopters to the scene. I can't erase people. If there was a giant pole or something, a telephone pole in my shot, that is there. That is stuck there. I'm not allowed to remove that. That's just a part of the job. It comes down to ethics, and the military is very strict on photo editing ethics. So that was just a little lesson for you guys, but let's get into Lightroom and I'll show you kind of the way I edited a few of these images. This was a winter survival exercise where we got dropped off up in the mountains and kind of left there to survive for a couple days. You can see the helo right there. And I got dropped off with a couple of these tactical guys, and I photographed, how they survived in super extreme cold weather because that's what they have to do for their job. And then ultimately at the end of the mission, we had to call the helicopters and come pick us up and extract us from the location. I shot these on the Nikon D5, if I'm not mistaken. And then just a caveat to all of this, I just want to throw in there because I have to. My job kind of makes me do this. Pretty much everything I say in here is all my own opinion and the opinion of my channel, and nothing of this is endorsed by the government or the military, Department of Defense, any of that junk at all. That is my daytime job. This is kind of, my nighttime fun stuff, editing photos that I do. So whatever I say is all my own ideas. So let's get started with this photo. The first thing I'm going to do, like I said, I'm going to do the basic edits to make this look good, not changing anything too crazy. I'm going to do some white balance. The snow is great for getting that white balance. That looks good. I might do a little bit of a crop. 2x3 or 4x6 when you're doing a vertical just looks really tall. So I like cropping that down to either a 5x7 or maybe a 4x5. That might be a little bit too much. I don't want to lose this guy's head over here. I don't want to lose this guy's head. They're all kind of framing this guy right here in the middle. So that looks pretty good. White balance looks good. And let's see, I'm going to bring, our highlights are a little bit rough. Let's bring those down a touch. There we go. Bring down the exposure. Again, just doing minor edits because when I saw this in real life, I could see a little bit of detail in the sky. So bring back a tiny bit of detail in the uniforms. And then here we go. Add some contrast by turning our blacks down a little bit. Actually, quite a bit. And then we'll add a little bit of our whites in there. Now, clarity is something that we usually tend to shy away from. It ends up looking very unrealistic, and that comes down to my credibility as a photographer, and I don't want to over edit these things. So I tend to add usually no more than 10 or 20% clarity just for a little bit of that sharpness in there. That looks good. You can see if I crank that clarity way too much, that just looks unrealistic and not that great. So again, just a touch of clarity. And again, you guys feel free to drop any questions that you have as I go right there in the comments or the chat section, and I will answer those to the best of my ability. Now, dehaze is another one that you can take too far. Very, very subtle. That looks good. And then usually tone curve is something I'll save for last. Let's go into detail and deal with some sharpening. So I want this guy's face to be nice and sharp. So again, according to my rules, I can do some sharpening. I'll add some detail. That looks pretty good. Pretty good. And I don't see any noise going on here. Again, super low ISO when I shot this, 100. I shot this on a 14mm prime, which when I'm shooting exercises and stuff like that, a 14mm prime is extremely wide, and it helps me capture these super wide, dynamic compositions. And I'm going to turn this color noise down because there's no reason we need that cranked so high. That looks pretty good. And sometimes I'll go in here and just for fun add a little bit of a vignette. And a vignette's kind of another natural thing that a lens will do. So it's not something that's unethical to add to your imagery. So let's see what that looks like before and after. And we'll just kind of play with it a little bit. That looks pretty good. I like that vignette. So here's our before, just hitting backslash. Here's our after. Now this is looking a little bit dark when I compare it to the before. So I'm going to turn our exposure up a little bit. Bring it up about a half stop. That looks a little bit better. Maybe bring up our whites a touch because I did lose that bright snow and I don't want to completely lose that. Add some contrast. There we go. It's looking a little bit better. And maybe cool the image down just a touch. I think that's looking pretty darn good. Again, here's our before, here's our after, and that really represents kind of what the image looked like when I initially shot it. So I think that looks halfway decent. What is up, Cloudy? Glad to see you in here. Kind of got distracted with my editing a little bit. So what's cool about my job and what's not? That's a hard question. What's cool about my job is I get to do a lot of cool missions. I got to fly on a lot of aircraft. I've got to fly in helicopters and bombers and all sorts of crazy things. Here's a selfie of me getting lifted up into a helicopter, which was pretty cool. We'll get into some of that in a second. But I've got to do some pretty darn cool things, so I can't complain about my job too much. The inconvenient part is, even though I'm a photographer, I still have all of, the military rules because I'm still in the military, still wear the uniform. So I have those rules. I still have to, abide by all the military rules. Still have to stay in shape, run fitness tests, do all that kind of fun stuff, which is actually good because I recommend that in a lot of my videos since I do a lot of hiking and long walks and stuff like that, carrying all this camera gear. So I recommend everybody to stay in shape all the time in my videos. So this does help me to stay in shape, the mandatory exercising, which is a good thing. That's not a bad thing at all. The one kind of pain about this job is I have to do paperwork for all of my imagery. So if I went out on a photo shoot, have I broken gear? Yes, I have. I'll definitely get into that, and we'll talk about that on the shoot. Let's see, I've dropped gear, I've dropped cameras, I've had cameras freeze. When I was shooting this, when I initially went out, it was somewhere around negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm not sure what that is in Celsius, but way below zero. So it was super cold, and I was shooting with a Nikon D5 for this one. And I can't remember if I had one camera body or two, but if I had a second one, it would have been a D810, which I was shooting with at the time. But I had a D5, and I shot video and photo on this shoot. And I'm going to do, let's see. Yeah, I'm going to put together a little video more specifically about this cold weather survival mission that I did. I think that would be a lot of fun to watch. And I shot a lot of really nice 4K video, getting lifted up into the helicopter, having the helicopter come around for like the landings and the extract and all of that stuff. We did 9-line evacuations and all sorts of survival stuff. Built a big, we built a big signal fire, threw some smoke grenades, did some cool stuff, and I have some photos of those smoke grenades. Here we go. Right here, and we'll get to editing that soon. But yeah, there are upsides, there are downsides to this job. I've had pieces of my tripod that are plastic just snap off. I'm actually going to copy and paste this edit. So Command Shift Copy. That looks good. Effects, I don't need any of that. Copy. And then we're going to move on to this next image and paste that over. Yeah, that looks pretty good. I might try a graduated filter here. But you can see all of these spots right here. There's the helo right there. Massive amount of rotor wash, which was basically, the rotor wash is when the helicopter blade's pushing the air down. That air has to go somewhere, so it hits the ground, and you can see all the rotor wash coming this way, knocking over all the snow. Excuse me. And we basically have to kneel down. I'm wearing the same. This was the uniform that I was wearing right here. You obviously can't see me in the shot. But all of this junk gets on your lens. And again, I was shooting with a 14 because I wanted to get this guy in the shot and this guy, and then all these guys just kind of line up and lead up to the helo right there. So I'm going to play with my settings here, play with my contrast. That looks pretty good. And I'm not going to get too much of the sky back. Actually, I don't think, let's see. Oh yeah, that's not really clipped. That's good. The D5 has pretty awesome dynamic range. And here, I'm going to play with dehaze just a bit to cut through the snow. You got to be really careful though, because sometimes dehaze does some crazy things. But I think that's pretty good. I like this little bit of a white glow around the helicopter for contrast. That's not too bad right there. Yes, military pays for, my military gear. So when I go to a base, I usually get issued a camera. So I was issued like a D810 lenses and stuff. There's a couple things like videos and stuff I've shot on my own GH5 just because at the time we didn't have, those nice D5s or some of the technology I needed at a base that had low funding. Oh, that's a little bit too dark. That's better. Yeah, again, you have to be super careful here how you edit these images, because if they look extremely edited, you get in trouble. But I like having this guy's head right here. One of the helicopter guys, special mission aviator. You can see the other one up here. It's a little bit blurry because helicopter was kind of swinging back and forth. It was super windy. It looks a little bit warm. I'm going to cool this image down a touch. There we go. Just a little bit of blue to emphasize that cold. And let me see. I'm going to play around with some of my color. I do like that camera flat profile. I like starting with the camera flat profile, and then I'll mess around with some of the other ones. But it feels like it gives you a little more dynamic range. And then sometimes I'll bump up to Adobe Standard if I really want a little bit more contrast. This image is okay. Not anything to really brag about. I was laying in the snow to get this image. This was right before I got lifted up into the helicopter. And right here, let's paste those settings over. This is me getting lifted up. It's a little bit dark. Let's bring some of those highlights back in. The vignette is way too strong on this one. Actually, in this case, I'm going to turn that vignette off altogether. Okay, it was the dehaze that was doing some weird stuff. I'm going to completely take that dehaze off. Turn down those highlights. The whites were a little bit hot as well. There we go. Everything I do is a matter of just kind of staring at my image and moving sliders back and forth. Yeah, there's a little bit of motion blur to that, but I really don't care because this was just kind of a cool image in a cool moment at the time. But yes, definitely a total pain to swap lenses. That's why I prefer, if possible, if I can have two camera bodies, that would be awesome. If I can't, I got to be super careful. So this is me. Actually, to give you guys some context, the helicopter was about, let's say, 20 feet in the air, and I would be about right here being hoisted up into it. Let's paste these settings over, Command V on a Mac. Again, our dehaze is way too strong on this one. Let's turn that down to like 10. That's better. And then I want to preserve the detail in the shadows here. There's the winch and the line to pull us up. This is another aviator guy. He's controlling the winch right there. You can see him. And this guy's sitting in the helicopter, making sure nothing happens to me as I go down, or up and down. There we go. That looks pretty cool. In this case, I'm going to use a gradient filter right here. I don't know why it's blue. There we go. Let's get rid of this. Don't want any color. Perfect. Because again, the sky's a little bit blown out and didn't look that way to my eye. So I bring down the highlights just a touch. Come on. And try and control this filter a little bit better. So it looks like some of these highlights might be clipped, and that's okay. If they are, I'll just leave them alone. But yeah, it doesn't look like I'm going to get anything back in those highlights. So I'm going to call that good. And there was the before and the after. Again, we just pumped up a little bit of that contrast. Let's see. Oh man, that stinks. Yeah, you kind of have to, when it comes down to the military, there are so many rules, at least for our military, so many rules and guidelines you kind of have to follow. There we go. Save some of the highlights in this one. But there's so many rules, you kind of have to almost have it as your full-time job to be able to memorize all those rules and everything like that. Let's see, let's go 5x7 for this guy. Crop it in a little bit. And that's cool. You can see this dude's feet right there. A little light on the bottom of the helo right there. I'm going to copy these settings and just kind of keep on moving through. This was the team I was out with. There's that dehaze again. That's way too much. That's better. Yeah, I think my lens was fairly clean at this point. Now you can see the helicopter back there. Now this was before the helicopter did a second sweep to come pick us up. Yeah, I love that little bit of a... It looks like my lens flare almost kind of highlights the edge of my vignette, which is kind of cool right there. You can see my heavy vignette from my wide angle, and then that little bit of lens flare from having the sun come right in. And there it is there. It's almost kind of like a big circle that looks kind of neat. I did end up publishing this image. I really like this image. I'm actually going to turn this vignette off and then do some profile corrections or lens corrections. There we go. I'm going to turn off the natural vignette that happened from my lens. And then this got a little bit bright. That's better. And I like how this guy is standing here kind of right in this flare. Then you got the helo taken off over there. I want to bring back some of this detail. And the helicopter. That's good. Now you can see those windows of the helicopter kind of zipping off, but I was nice and low, and that was my 14mm prime again. Just kind of laying in the snow. I love seeing the texture of the snow, and shooting on that 14 mil, the depth of field was just so wide. Yeah, thank you. This was one of my favorite shots. Just, it kind of encompassed the whole mission. You could see how cold it was. You can see the snow blowing. You can see one of the guys we were working with right there. There's another guy laying on the ground. Oh, and then you can see there's a guy there. There's a guy. You can see these heads kind of popping up over there, and I'm sure I saw that through my viewfinder and just kind of figured out that was there. But there's all that rotor wash. Look how high the helicopter is. He's about 50 feet in the air. Here are some of my favorite images, though. I caught this silhouette, and I'm not going to copy and paste the settings. I'm actually going to go through here and edit this myself. Let's add that standard color profile. This had a nice natural kind of blue to it that I did with the white balance in camera, but the raw capture kind of turned that down a little bit, and it looks very flat. So I'm going to add that blue back that was naturally there, and that little bit of contrast. Let's turn down our highlights a touch and preserve a little bit of that detail. There we go. But there's these streaks of the sun that was coming through this rotor wash. I don't want to add too much to the shadow. I like that nice strong silhouette. There we go. Let's add to the blacks a touch. And a little bit to the whites will make these clouds pop out. And here's where I'll add a hint of clarity. See, I don't want to go overboard. That's way overboard, but I do love that you can see those sun flares. So I'll turn that down a bit, and I will dehaze. It's again, I don't want to go too far with this. I just want to add a bit of contrast, and then I might correct a little bit right there. I think that's working pretty well for me so far. Maybe if I add some texture, it'll bring out some of the snow. Okay, I think that's good. Touch of vibrance, because this image deserves a little bit of vibrance. And then we'll go down to our detail. We'll make sure, I think these people, I want to make sure they're nice and sharp. Add some detail. Make sure we turn down this color noise, because there's no real color noise. But I really love this image. Command-Shift-C to copy that. And then I'm going to copy this over to most of these. And I'll kind of just go through here, paste the settings, and see which one I like best. That looks all right. Here we go. This was one of my favorites right here, because they're actually extracting this guy here with the 9 line and doing the medical extract. Let's see. And then sorry if I don't get to your questions. But yeah, I love that 14mm lens so much. Now I think I probably switch to a 70 to 200 is my guess at this point. When the helo is up close, or when it came through, I think I switched to most likely a 70 to 200, just so I could kind of snipe these guys up here. Look at all that snow. So I want to be careful. I don't want to do too much noise reduction, because then it'll make all this look super mushy, but that is just the way it looked. I'm going to add some contrast. There we go. Taking the whites down a touch helps preserve some of these highlights. You can see this sun right here. It's kind of clipped, but that's okay, because I'm shooting into the sun and that doesn't bother me. Let's go through, add some contrast. That looks pretty good. That's a nice full histogram, and I'm pretty happy with that. Do the Command-Shift-C. Copy those settings over to this one. And then I really like this image, because you could see a lot more of these, the sun rays. And then you can also see this dude's hands moving, which was kind of neat. We'll go through, we'll edit these a little bit more in a second. I tried doing a vertical. The only bad news about a vertical is because I had my 24-70, the widest I could go was 70, and I could barely fit the helicopter. And the more I stepped back, I was leaving footprints in the snow. You can't see them here, but I couldn't step back because you would see a trail of footprints, and that would be kind of lame. But I do like this shot. I really wish I didn't crop this out in camera. There's nothing that I can really do about it. I'm going to straighten the bird out a little bit. Add some more blacks into this one. I really love, you can really see these flares and sun rays coming out. I think that turned out pretty neat. And then these, I'm just going to do the same thing. Kind of the same photo. This was before they started lifting the guy up. That's an okay photo. This is an okay photo. Yeah, those are just okay. My favorite would probably be, I think this one ended up being my favorite image that I had published out of all of those. Let's look at a couple more. There we go. I do like this one. I don't like that I cropped this out, but again, I was shooting, this was at 200, and I was really trying to see this guy right here, and I was trying to see these guys up in the cockpit. Let's edit this one a little bit, turn my exposure down a touch. I'm almost always turning those highlights down. It was so bright out with that direct sun and the sun bouncing back and forth between the clouds and the snow. I don't think I have to turn up, I'm not going to turn up my shadows, but I will turn my blacks down a bit. Just a touch of clarity. You can see, especially right here, I'm seeing that detail kind of pop, and I like that. And then dehaze to cut through some of that snow, but not too much. And this is where I'll add my overall contrast, and you can see if I go too much, I'm losing that shadow detail. So then I will come back and just, again, very minor, very subtle edits. I will add some saturation, and I will cool this image down a bit. I think that looks pretty good. Let's copy those settings over in case I want to use them for my next image. Let's see what I have here. Okay, here's maybe a better version. Let's see if I clip those shadows. Oh, nope, it looks like just enough to salvage. Not the shadows. If I said shadows, I meant highlights. It's a little bit bright. There we go. All that detail. That's why I love the D5 so much. It has something ridiculous like 12 or 13 stops of dynamic range. And again, you can see all this rotor wash and the heat coming off these propellers right now. There we go. I really love pumping that contrast. I love helos so much. These guys were a lot of fun to fly in. Now this one, I just pasted my settings over, and if you look at my histogram, you can see it's way off to the right, and that's not necessarily a bad thing because everything in here, it was just bright, and there's not much I can do about that. First thing I'll do is go to my blacks and pump those down a little bit. I don't want to turn down the exposure too much because it was super bright out there. I'll level out my horizon, scoot this over a little bit. Again, that's an okay photo. There's not a ton going on. It's just a helicopter and snow blowing around. I'll paste those settings onto this image, kind of the same thing here. Yeah, just a close-up of the cabin. Nothing too crazy going on there. Again, just kind of an okay image. When I go out on these exercises, sometimes I will go out and I'll shoot anywhere from 200 to 500. Sometimes if it's an all-day exercise or a 2-day exercise or mission, maybe I'll shoot 1,000 images for a single mission. This one I'm pretty sure it's kind of cool. You can see the pilot right there. There's the other pilot right there, and again our mission aviator right there with his lift. And that nice bright sunspot, which I actually don't mind. Sometimes things are just going to be overexposed and there's nothing you can do about it. And that doesn't hurt my feelings. But shooting in the snow is definitely difficult, especially this rotor wash. It was so darn bright out. You can see my settings over here, ISO 100, so the lowest ISO possible, 200 mil. And then I have to shoot at a fairly low shutter speed. So when it comes to shooting helicopters, you kind of have to throw that reciprocal rule out the window. So normally for a steady shot, I know the rule is for your shoot one over the focal length. So to get a sharp shot, I should be shooting at least 1/200th of a second. But as you can see here, I'm shooting 1/100th of a second. And that's to get those helicopter blades to blur. If you don't make the blades blur, you can see they blur just a touch here because that one's actually at a 400th of a second. If I shoot too fast of a shutter speed, it will stop the blades where they are, and it looks really weird when helicopter blades are not moving. You can see again, there's 100th of a second, and there's some nice blur to these blades right there. But if the blades are extremely sharp, it looks like the helicopter is just kind of floating there in the air, and that looks really weird. So that's kind of one of our back pocket rules that we try and remember when we're shooting helicopters. You got to remember to keep that shutter speed nice and low because it looks like, a tin can on a stick just kind of sitting up there in the air, and it looks really weird. So if you've never shot helicopters before, it's just something to kind of keep in your back pocket. I like this image. I don't like these trees down here, and they kind of take away from the helo, which I like centered up right there. That's kind of neat. Again, not a great image, nothing I'm going to brag or write home about. But whoops, undo that explosion. Just kind of tweaking it. Here's the before and the after of that one. Again, just salvage the highlights, making it look like what I saw in real life. Unfortunately, I probably couldn't have used it on the 14 millimeter. I have to have a special ND filter for that one that goes actually behind the lens. I have that 14 millimeter here somewhere, probably on my shelf or something like that. I do have that sitting around here, but yes, ND filter would have been a huge help shooting out in the snow. Unfortunately, at the time, I just didn't have one because I like to get good quality ND filters, and they're pretty darn expensive. And the unit that I was at before couldn't afford this. So now, this is one of my favorite shots. This was actually published by the Pentagon, which was pretty cool. It's made it into a couple magazines and some stuff like that. But this is how intense it was in that rotor wash that I was talking about. Here's another image. And I think this was actually the image that got published because you could see this nice line right here. But this guy is covered up in goggles and gloves and a nice thick puffy jacket on top of his fleece jacket, on top of his uniform. You can see this guy's like zipping up his coat. This guy's probably protecting his face. The nice thing is you can see this histogram, nothing is clipped. I still have all my shadow detail, and I still have all my highlight detail. Let's edit this one first, because you can see this histogram is even more compressed just because of all that rotor wash. And it's like 60, 70 mile an hour winds that are hitting you in the face. Yeah, there we go. Try and bring back kind of what it looked like in real life. It was very contrasty. I don't want to turn my blacks down too much because, again, this is one of those scenes where, my black values weren't there because everything was covered in snow. I might dehaze a hint, but again, I don't want to go too much, and I don't want to lose the integrity of the shot. So 18% there. Clarity is going to be iffy. I don't want to add too much clarity. Let's do maybe 10% clarity. And then vibrance, there's no color in this scene other than these blades of grass right here, but that looks pretty good. Detail is something I'm going to play with to make sure the edge of this guy is sharp. I'm going to hold down Alt. There we go. Find out where my edges are, turn up the detail a touch, because I want these edges. There you go, that's nice and sharp. And that looks pretty good. I do want to add some more contrast to this scene. And this is just going to be a matter of eyeballing this, making it look good. And again, there's the before, very flat, because again, I was shooting raw and shooting a flat color profile. And there's my edit, and I'm going to add, let's see, let's play with these color profiles and see what looks good. Standard looks good. Portrait adds a little contrast and sharpening. Landscape adds some color. Yeah, let's go with this Adobe Standard. I think that looks pretty good. And then I'm going to Command-Shift-C, copy these settings over, and paste them onto this guy. That looks better. It does look a little bit dark, so I'll brighten up these shadows a touch. We brought down the blacks a little bit too much. There we go. I like that. I like having these highlights right here just on the borderline of clipping, but you still have all that detail in the snow. So they're nice and bright and they are pretty darn white, but again, you do have that detail in the snow. So, hey Jeff, this is Adobe Lightroom. Welcome to the chat. Glad to have you. But yeah, I'm just playing around here in Adobe Lightroom, messing around with photos from a winter survival mission that I was on. So this is a pretty good, I'm happy with calling this a final image. See, it's nice and sharp here. You can see, the silhouette of a person there and the silhouette of a person back there. It looks like they're, pulling down their goggles over their eyes, but I'm really happy with this image. Here's the before, nice and flat raw image. And then there is the final edit. I am super happy with that one. White balance looks good, sharpness looks good, contrast looks good, and you get a very good sense of, if I had a pair of goggles on and my face wasn't being frozen, this is what I would have been able to see with my eyes. So I'm going to paste those same settings over to this. I think I brought this image in here just to show how hard it was to shoot out here with these helicopters flying around. My lens was just getting covered in snow and ice, and it didn't matter how many times I cleaned it with my lens cleaning cloth. It was done. My lens was just absolutely covered, and I had 2 lens cleaning cloths with me, but it didn't matter because I used each one once, and it was done. So I ended up having to use my gloves to clean off the front of my lens, and it was a difficult shoot. So if this kind of gives you guys an idea of the conditions that, as a military photographer that we get to shoot in, it's either this kind of snow, or it's going to be sand being kicked up in your lens, or dirt or dust, whatever. Not a good place to be changing your lenses. Not a good place to, be setting a camera lens down or say a camera body down, because it's gone. Let's move on to this image. Looks like there's a touch of motion blur. I shot at 200th of a second. Maybe I was trying to get this image pretty quick, but I do like this shot. This guy just looks super cool, and he looks super, tactical with all of his stuff on. Let's see if we can salvage some of these clouds back here. I don't want the background to be completely blown out. I want some contrast here with his, face mask. Do a quick white balance. That is way off. Let's try that again. That's better. Want a little bit of warmth, but not too much. And then we will bring down our blacks for some contrast. But yeah, this is getting all this stuff in your lens is super annoying. So I do complain about that quite a bit. It is a difficult job. I'm not going to say it's easy. So just think about like going out in the street and doing street photography, but then, having someone throw snowballs at you, and you're still expected to, come back with some images. So there's the before, there's the after, just kind of a minor contrast edit to make this look a little bit better. Here we go. This shot's going to be a little bit more fun. Let's start off with a crop. I don't know what's going on over here, but that's not very important. And this guy over here, not very important. I'm going to throw this guy right on the rule of thirds right there. And that way my horizon here with the snow and the tree line right on the rule of thirds as well. And we'll correct that horizon just a little bit. And I think his eyeballs are nice and sharp. You can see his eyes are red from the snow and the ice and the dry weather. Make sure his eyes are nice and sharp. Looks great. Let's go through and start adding some contrast. So white balance, at first glance, looks good to me. Right around 5300. Daylight settings. Bring back a tiny bit of that. I don't need to bring up my shadows much. We'll add some whites just to brighten up his eyeballs a little bit. Add some blacks for some contrast. That looks good. I'll do my overall global contrast. That looks great. And then it is getting a little bit dark in some of those areas, so add a touch to the shadows. So that's just kind of... This image is really just how much contrast can we add to make his eyeballs really pop out. Because this is, right here, this is the subject of the image. So I might even go in and crop this guy down a touch more. Bring his eyes up on that third. I like that a little bit better. Again, just making minor edits straight out of that horizon. I do like that. That's pretty decent. So there's our before. Sharpening and contrast is really all I need to do. If I wanted to go a little bit further, lens corrections, sorry, not lens corrections, effects, and we'll do a very slight vignette. So before the vignette, after the vignette, that just kind of brings you into his face a little bit. And I think that looks pretty good. Sweet. So we have 4 people in the chat right now. That's awesome. And bring my stats here and look real quick. So you guys do know I will be hitting 8,000 subscribers in a couple days, probably within the next 2 weeks. And I think I'm going to do a participation giveaway pretty soon. So everyone that is here, participating in the chat, you guys are getting, extra points. I know Cloudy, you've been here quite a few times in all of our chats. So I'm going back and I'm looking through some of those chat logs and I'm seeing who participated in the chat, and they're all getting a couple extra bonus brownie points towards the 8,000 giveaway. So you and Jeff as well are getting some extra points towards that 8,000 subscriber Polaroid giveaway. And so if that inspires anybody we have 3 or 4 other viewers. If anybody wants to drop into the chat and say hi, that'll give you guys some extra points. Just throwing that out there as some motivation, some participation motivation. Gonna paste those settings over again. That's a little bit too much. Undo that. So I really like this shot because he's standing right in front of the smoke grenade right here. But what I thought was a better shot was when I zoomed in right here. I like that one a little bit better. It would have been cool if he was looking at me, but it just didn't happen. So it is what it is. There we go. So it's one of those ones again. I'm going to play with the contrast. I shot this a little bit under, so we'll bring some of those whites back, but I don't want to completely kill our highlights. I'll just do what I can to make this image look cool. There we go. It really brings out some of the saturation in that smoke bomb. I'll bring up our vibrance a touch. Not too much. Contrast, yep. There we go. So before, after, again, that's the biggest thing. And especially when I have to go through an entire mission that is 1,000 images. Actually, I want to see what this looks like in black and white. That's okay. If I have to go through, 1,000 images for a shoot, let's crop this super wide. Yeah. Looks pretty cinematic. That's pretty cool. Like I was saying, if I have to go through 1,000+ images, this is really all I have time to do, other than being limited on what I'm allowed to do with my images. There's only so much time that I have, because maybe I go out and I shoot 1,000 images and then I have to have them edited by the next day. That's another, constraint on what I have to do. Yeah, thank you. Hopefully, I shared it on Twitter and I shared it on Reddit as well. So hopefully we get a couple people in here. Otherwise, you've been one of the most active people in my chats. I think you've been to all of my live streams this year so far. Here we go. I love this image as well. So this operator had a headset and he was talking to the guys in the helicopter. And this little thing, I think it was called an anemometer. It measures wind speed. So they're measuring the wind speed on the ground to let the helicopter pilots know in advance when they land so they can make a safe landing. Especially when they're coming into a location here, into this clearing with all these trees. They don't want to have, this helicopter is your lifeline to get out of this, cold situation or dangerous situation. So you want to make sure your helicopter is safe. So they're relaying the airspeed to the wind speed to the helicopter for, safe landing and safe extraction. You can see here in this image, this is another important little tip. This right here is what's called a tangent. And basically, I have a big square right here, which is my composition. And then this guy's head is a big circle. And you can see they're kind of bumping into each other at their intersection points right here. So I just have the helmet just kind of touching the edge. And it really brings my attention up here. And this is called a tangent, when two things are basically not overlapping, but just touching. And it creates kind of like, it does something with your eyes. I have a video on minimizing tangents in your photography and composition. But you kind of want all or nothing. I either want, a gap up here above his head where I have some head space, or I want to crop into his helmet. So now my eyeballs go right here instead of the strange, intersection point. And it causes tension with your eye. It's like a psychological thing. But again, I have a video on avoiding tangents in photography that kind of gets into that a little bit more. I might need to remake that video eventually, because I made that a long time ago. But I like this image. It's pretty darn sharp, pretty well exposed. Yeah, that's nice and sharp. That looks great. Go down to my, not split toning. So again, military editing, not really allowed to split tone. That's not something that we do. I'll start buzzing through these images a little bit quicker and just kind of show you the speed you kind of have to have. Like, I can't sit here all day. I might cool this image down a little bit to make it feel nice and cool. Again, I did that naturally with my white balance in camera. Portrait, that looks pretty darn good. There's the before, there's the after. Again, gets the job done of telling the story without over editing the image. Oh yeah, so you know exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to, you know, editing a ton of images. Your Japan images are awesome, by the way. I'm sure I've said that a couple times on your Instagram and on Twitter, but the photos that you've taken out there, some of the street photography, just absolutely awesome. And I'm super jealous, and I wish there were more lights in New York City similar to those in like Tokyo and some spots of Korea, because the places that you shoot and the places that like Noe shoots, just absolutely awesome colors. And New York City, they're trying to save money and save energy, and they're cutting back and they're going to those LED lights. I'm not a huge fan of those. They don't have the same character as the neons. So we're almost halfway through. Just a little preview. I got some cool images coming up that were in the thumbnail of this video, so it's not clickbait, and I wasn't lying to you. I do have some cool stuff from a completely different mission coming up, so I'll tease that for you guys a little bit. Here's a flying mission that I was on, and here is my house right here that I used to live in North Dakota. You can see all the snow that we had to deal with, but this is flying above our base in a helicopter. So yep, here we go. We were about to take off, and that was the other helicopter. We were flying in a formation of 3 helicopters total. But yeah, we're gonna get to these images. Some pretty cool stuff. Dang, we've been going for an hour already. That's awesome. But if everyone is interested, I will go through and I will edit all 60 plus of these images and just kind of keep talking as we go. Yeah, I hate that they're cutting, completely side tangent, I hate that they're cutting the neon signs. It drives me nuts. LED, they're brighter, and oh yeah, I'd love, on my list is got to get over to Seoul and got to get over to Tokyo. They're next on my list. I know there are some bases. There's like Kunsan Air Base and Osan Air Base out there that I'd love to get stationed at for a couple years. I'm not sure how far you are from any of those locations. And then there's some different bases in Japan as well that I can get stationed at that have fighter jets, which are pretty darn cool. And they do, I know they work a lot with the, I believe it's the Republic of, we do a lot of work in collaboration with like the Japanese military and the Republic of Korea military, which I actually just did a shoot not too long ago with some guys from, I believe it's the Korean, what is it called? Korean Space Operations Center, or it's the Republic of Korea Space Operations Center. It's one of those two. But those guys were awesome to work with. One of my next live streams, or I'll probably end up making a video just dedicated to that, will be about that Space Operations Center, those photos that I took. But going back to the editing, this was a vertical that I actually really liked because I think these two images kind of play well together. I like having this kind of the close-up of the face and then seeing his whole body in, we're in the middle of nowhere. These are just hills and mountains back here and standing in about 6 inches of snow, so we had to keep our boots dry to the best of our ability. Turn down the highlights in this a touch. Maybe the exposure just a touch, but I do like it nice and bright like this, and I like that slight hint of blue. Just make sure he's standing up nice and tall and straight. That looks pretty good. And again, he is on kind of the third right there. That looks good. I'm going to copy these settings over. And then I just took a couple more of these shots. That one's okay. Probably not going to keep it. This one's okay. But this is again where I brought up those tangents earlier. I think, let's see. That was number 216. That was number 232. What I did here is when I was talking about headspace earlier, I gave myself quite a bit of headspace, so now I can crop in and not have to worry about, the head sitting right on the edge. Because again, if I replicate that and I put the head right on the edge, it looks like he's bumping his head on the top of the frame. So I'm not going to create that tangent. That crop looks really good, and I actually prefer that one to this. I don't know. With this one cropped in a little bit more, I actually might prefer this one. I might do a little bit more of a crop. Yeah, I like that tighter shot. So here we go. Just again, I would shoot 4, 5, 6 of a shot just to make sure I got it right. This was our signal fire, and we were having some issues with our smoke grenades. With the super low pressure and dry air of North Dakota, we were having a lot of issues with this smoke. It wasn't getting up into the air, and the helicopters couldn't see it. So we built a fire, and the heat of the fire made the smoke rise up into the air. So that was a cool little survival trick that we learned. Again, it's all about just the right amount of contrast. Now, look here, if you pay attention to the smoke, these whites make the edges of the smoke really pop out, which is pretty neat, I think. There we go. Just got to answer some text messages real quick. All right. Yeah, again, the fire on all that heat lifted this smoke up into the air, which was a pretty cool trick that they taught us. This is one I'll add a very small amount of clarity, and then sometimes I'll add that little bit of dehaze just for some contrast. I forgot about my chat window. Oh man, that's not too bad. I would not mind. If I was all the way over there, I definitely wouldn't mind traveling, but yeah, I would absolutely love, even if it was just a temporary trip, I'd love to go out to Seoul. It's on my bucket list, but yeah, so this was just kind of a detail shot. I really want to bring out those greens and that fire, just the contrast of this green and that the yellow orange is just working really well for me in this shot. Detail looks pretty good. There's our smoke grenade. And I love this volume and this detail in the smoke. Super happy with that one. I'm going to Command Shift C, copy. I'm going to paste these settings over onto this guy. That image is okay. I don't think I like it as much as the first one. And then there's this one as well. The smoke, there's no real detail in the smoke. And then this is kind of bright over here, but that is kind of on the rule of thirds. If I crop this guy in a bit, I mean, I still like this one better. This is my favorite so far. Bring up those shadows a hint, because again, I don't want to lose the detail of this shot because it says smoke grenade right there. I'm gonna correct that a little bit. I don't want to lose my fire, but I also don't want my fire to distract. Sometimes I hold my hand up over my screen a little bit to see what it would look like if I got rid of like a certain part of the image. Yeah, that looks pretty good. A little more contrast. There we go. This was one of my favorite kind of detail shots. There's that before. There's that after. Again, I'm just trying my hardest to make it look the way it did in real life. That's really, that's my main job ultimately. Here's these guys kind of putting some kindling on the fire. Yeah, that looks pretty good. I am happy with that. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. That's the one cool thing about these missions is every time you go out, you're shooting thousands and thousands of images. I just wish that, what was I going to say? Lost my train of thought. But like I said, when you're going out, you're shooting thousands of images, and it's just so much awesome practice. Whoops, I left my camera bag in the shot. That is my low pro. I don't remember what that bag was. I hated this bag though when I had it. I got rid of it because I hated it so much. Because right here is the camera compartment, and this is just some weird sack on top, and it's just, this bag is a pain. I did a review on it. I don't remember. It's like a 200 all-weather. It's not the fastback. I can't for the life of me think of what this camera bag was, but we were all just stacking our bags over here, and I guess I accidentally left mine in the shot, so whoops, it happens. Kind of ruins the shot for me because this bag just doesn't fit in. It's bright orange. If I crop it out, I'm going to lose his foot, so I don't even really like this shot that much. But, yep, that was the camera bag I was using, and my mistake for leaving it in the shot. Here's another good one. I have that little bit of head space, so I'm going to leave. I have the option I can either crop from the bottom, but once I don't want to center his face, so I'm going to have to take off the top of his helmet. Get this in nice and close, and then give him that looking space right there. Turn up that contrast. Turn on the highlights a touch. Shadows look good. Make those whites and blacks pop, and then I'll do my overall global contrast. This one might look good with just a hint of clarity. Again, I'll do 10 or 15%. That looks good. And then dehaze. Oh, way too much dehaze. Let's try 10. Much better. So what that dehaze did, and the contrast, brought out some of the sweat and condensation you could see here, and then brought out his nose was super cold right there, so that details that you almost can't see here in the raw because that just blends together. But once you start adding that contrast, now his camo looks really cool. There's kind of a blue haze or reflection in his visor from the sky. It looks cool. So this one's pretty good the way it is. So now we are moving on to a different exercise and a different, different mission altogether. This was an on-base, nuclear transport mission. I did a review, and I compared the BP-150, and the bag was a 250 something, but again, it's not in my recent memory because I wasn't a huge fan of the bag, and I got rid of that sucker as soon as I could. Again, it wasn't a fastback, but I'm trying to remember. It's going to drive me nuts if I don't remember this bag. I'm going to my YouTube channel real quick because it's literally going to drive me nuts. We're going to go to my channel. We are going to go to my videos. Woohoo, streaming live. And we're going to scroll all the way back, and it's going to drive me nuts when I find this video, and it's going to make me so mad because the bag was right on the tip of my tongue. Where are you at? All right, we are close. 300 all-weather. Photo Sport 300 AW2. I never would have remembered that, and I'm not even mad at myself for not remembering that. It's a horrible name for a bag. Yep. This guy was huge. Yeah, these are ridiculous. So I don't know if you can see back here, these are a bunch of B-52s. The B-52 is one of my favorite planes. You can see a line of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 6 of them right there. And then on the other side, there's going to be 6 of them pointing towards the other ones, facing them. We'll get into some photos of B-52s. If you've never seen a B-52 from the top, there's one right there that's pretty cool. This was flying over the B-52 flight line. So yeah, these are the C-17s. They transport things to and from base. Shot this on a 14 mil as well. Super wide aperture. I was trying to blur out some of this texture with the wide aperture and blur out the background so it wasn't very distracting. But the first thing I would do with this guy, it's a very symmetrical image. And the one thing I like about it, I'm going to crop out, I think this was my hand. I didn't have a tripod. I was shooting physically on the ground. I think I may have put my camera on top of like some gloves or something like that. And then the way I was holding the camera to keep it straight, you can see I think those were my fingers. So we're going to make that nice and symmetrical. And the cool thing about this image, what breaks the symmetry, you can see this guy with the M4 going up into the plane. So it kind of like takes your eyeball right there because you see these stairs and you see him break the symmetry on that side. So this is another one. I'm going to cool this down a touch. It was raining pretty hard. Turn that exposure down a touch. I really want to salvage my highlights. Yeah, there we go. And those storm clouds. This was super dark. Super contrasty. And I kind of want to, I don't want to take this too far again. I don't want to over edit this, but I want to edit it the right amount. Yeah, clarity's a bit too much. I'll go through, do some lens corrections. Get rid of this vignette right there. There we go, that's so much better. And I'm going to level my horizon. I believe that is, let's see, Command with the crop open. Then I can click and drag on my horizon. That's much better. Straighten it out a little bit. And again, trying to make this symmetrical. Symmetry is super important. I'm going to try graduated filter. Gradient right here. I don't know why this blue keeps coming. Stupid blue. I'm just going to turn my highlights down again. That's better. So now again, just making this image look like what it looked like to my eyes. Let's try -1. That's better. Because it was super stormy and you just can't see because I was trying to make sure I shot a little bit overexposed on this one. You can see my histogram is about a stop and a half to the right, overexposed, because I didn't want to lose the detail in this guy right here. Looking back, maybe not the smartest idea, but I knew I could bring back, I think this was with the D5, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see if my Now it's not my metadata. Oh well. So I think that was with the D5. Let's do a little bit of sharpening. And I always know with the D5 I can shoot a little bit sloppy, which is not a good thing. But I knew that if I tried to preserve some of these details, I could always go back in later in the edit and save some of those details and save some of my highlights. And personally, I know not everybody does this. I prefer, if I'm going to have to shoot on one side or the other, either shooting to the right or shooting to the left, overexposing or underexposing. In the video world, I prefer, that's where I came from, I prefer to shoot overexposed a little bit, and bring back my highlights versus shooting underexposed and then trying to bring up noisy shadows. But again, that's just kind of bad habit from my past in the video. We'll bring back some of those shadows here, and dealing with noisy video. So that looks pretty good. Again, our before, overexposed, a touch, about a stop. Then our after, again, I don't want to go full silhouette. I love the detail here in these turbines. Pretty cool. I will add a nice vignette to this guy. So I want the midpoint right in the center. Perfect. Feather it. Make it nice and round. And then we'll bring it back a touch. I don't want to go too heavy-handed with the vignette, but there we go. That looks pretty darn good. Nice contrasty image. Again, all within, kind of my ethical limitations. There's my before. There's my after. That is what I saw when I was laying on the ground. I saw this giant rainstorm. This giant jet right here, just ridiculously huge. And I think that looks pretty good. This was kind of 1 second. If you see, if we pay attention to this guy right here, these shots were just consecutive right before he makes that step up into the plane. And I don't think either one of these was better or worse than the other, just kind of two different shots. I think I put the camera on the ground and just did a little rapid fire to see what happened. This one has some more rain spots on the lens, I think. But yeah, you can see kind of right here a rain spot, and I might have some dust on the lens, which is okay for me to ethically remove. Hey Claudio, what's up? Glad to have you all the way from Brazil. Yeah, C5s are absolutely awesome. I got to fly, or C17s, I got to fly in a C5 over to England, which was pretty cool. And I have a little bit of video from England I'll end up chopping together as well. I did a little deployment over there. I'll chop all that together and make a video of some of my photos and missions to England from 2018. That was almost exactly, I got back from England exactly 2 years ago, at the beginning of February. I really want to go back to England though. This shot was pretty widely published as well. This was a little bit early in the day. We're kind of working from the end of the mission back to the beginning of the mission right here and the different aspects of it. So we had these guys, special forces guys, lined up to go get on the plane. So I'll straighten this out, make sure these guys are symmetrical, and this image has some symmetry to it. Make sure all these feet kind of line up right here. That looks good. I don't know what this is, this panel, but I don't really like that in my image, so I'm going to crop that out. But I do like the shield right here, this Air Mobility Command shield. I don't want to crop that out. This AFRC shield, I don't want to crop that one out either. I think that looks good. And then these guys' faces are nice and sharp. Let's see. Yeah, I might go with vivid. There we go, to add some punch. That looks pretty good. Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate the compliments. This was one of my favorite images I took, I think in, what year did I take this? 2018. Oh, actually 2017. So this was September 18th of 2017. Shot that on a 70 to 200 at 3.2 ISO 320. Again, you can see all that information over here as well, and I'm just hitting Command I right here, and that's showing me the file name and my specs or my metadata from the shoot right there. I'm going to take this, I'm going to blue this up a little bit, because again, it was raining, it was cold, it was miserable. I remember this day like it was yesterday. I don't want to lose these guys' faces in the shadows, so I'll bring up my shadows a touch. And then this, it's not really overexposed, but this area right here, you can see that's this little blip on my histogram. I'm going to bring those highlights down so my eye isn't going towards their legs. I want my eye to go right here, and that means bring up my exposure a bit. Yeah, I think a half stop looks good. And there you go. Now I'm starting to bring back, you can see their faces now right there. Clarity, I'll play with a touch. And what clarity is going to do, it's going to bring out some of these raindrops right here. It's going to bring out their faces a touch. And I don't think dehaze, yeah, that's not something I want to use on this image. But I'm going to mess with these whites and try and bring out their faces a bit. And then bring down the highlights to bring down this. And that looks pretty good right there. There's the before, there's the after. You can see I really made these guys pop. I made some of the texture in the plane pop a bit, but not too much. The big thing was to make those guys right there pop out. Let's see, let me find a face real quick. Yeah, there we go. So there's a face. Let's do some sharpening real quick. And then I didn't really show my, I guess, culling process of how I got down to these images. That's really important too, because when you have 1,000 or so images to edit, it's super important to be able to, you know, get down from 1,000 to 100 before I actually start editing. This actually looks really cool. I think this would make a cool poster. Let's add a little bit more sharpening. I just want to make sure their faces are super sharp. Yeah, that looks great. So again, before and after. Actually, I want to print a big poster of this. I think that would be really neat. This got published quite a bit. But yeah, you can see here, that's the side of the C5, right, or excuse me, C17 right here. Those guys were standing right under the wing, kind of to stay dry. And here's them about to raid the plane. Let's do Command Shift C to copy these settings over. And I think they will look good pasted onto this image. Let's see how that looks. That looks pretty good. I think my clarity is a little bit high. I don't want the tops of their heads glowing because that does not look very good. Let's turn clarity down to 10%. Yeah, just a touch better. And then same thing with this image right here. I'm going to paste these settings. I was running after these guys, so I was literally running and gunning and running after them to get this shot. Pretty darn high shutter speed, yeah, 1/640th of a second. You can see the individual raindrops here splashing on the ground. You can see the little droplets off of his boot, the raindrops there. You can see the rain is both being caught in the shadows and the highlights, which is pretty neat. I just think this is cool. Kind of the rain coming off, you know, the boots, catching the rain mid-air right there. It's kind of neat. Darken this image a touch. Bring up those shadows. I don't know what's going on right here. There might have been a post or something, or a pole that's kind of creating that vignette, but I'll get rid of that right there. I do want to keep the top of the wing, but I'm going to crop in a touch. And again, I'm going for that kind of symmetry. since we do have an odd number right here, we have the 1, 2, 3. So I'll throw this person in the center. There we go. That crop's not too bad. Just playing around with my settings here. Put that exposure back. I don't know if I like what I just did. I don't want to... Yeah, I don't really want this to be too bright right here. Let's turn down my whites a touch, because I want these guys to pop just a touch. It's all a matter of just kind of playing around, see what I can do. If I just kind of blow out my sky, that actually isn't too bad. I might like that a little bit better. Kind of clip my highlights here. Let's crop in just a touch more. But if I clip my highlights, now I get to see more of these reflections, more of the detail. And again, they're not quite clipped. That's not too bad right there. But yeah, it was super cool that I could catch all of these raindrops happening, which is a super high shutter speed. Let's make sure my horizon is level. I kind of got this little red line right here. It's helping me cheat a little bit, giving me a nice straight horizon line. I like that. Well, there's my red line right there around the jet. But yeah, you can see all these little droplets. And again, I was lucky that the D5, that I was able to focus with that. Got the ponchos on. Yeah, but focusing with the D5 was pretty great, even in the rain, but it was bouncing back and forth quite a bit. I'm just kind of lucky I got this. I think I was shooting on like continuous high. Let me copy these settings over. Whoops, wrong image. Copy these settings over onto this image. Should brighten it up quite a bit. That looks pretty cool. This guy looking through his scope right there is pretty neat. Gonna bring up my exposure on this quite a bit. And this is another one that, this is a bag, his gas mask is in this bag. And that's not that important to the shot. I'll keep a little bit of it in there, but let's try 4x5. Yeah, the gas mask isn't too important. I want to crop in on his eyeball because, especially when you're shooting people, their face is usually the most important thing. I don't want to turn the highlights down too much in this shot. Again, this is all just kind of playing around with these sliders and seeing what looks good. Sometimes you have to go over a little bit and punch that slider a bit and be a little heavy-handed with the edit. There we go, that looks pretty good. I like a little bit warmer in this shot just because, there we go. Again, sometimes, like I was saying, I'll punch the slider, go a little bit too far, and then I'll work my way back until it looks good. I just find that to be a little bit easier. Ooh, we got to do some noise reduction. But you can see again, these are little snow droplets being caught right here with a pretty fast 1/640th again. Snow droplets are freezing rain that we caught with that high shutter speed. Let's find his eyeball right there. That's what I like to... As my focus is off just a little bit, I think my focus point ended up hitting right on his ACOG scope right there. Bring up that detail a bit, mess with that masking, so we're getting the edges. That looks good. Again, I'm just holding down Alt or Option when I'm sliding that tool, just so it gives me that nice little preview. Now I'm going to do the same thing with noise reduction. I'm going to hold down Alt or Option on a Mac, drag that slider up, and working in black and white to do your sharpening helps a lot. So you're not getting distracted by all the colors. It helps a lot to work in black and white. You can see the edges a lot more clearly. So I think that looks pretty darn good. Let's see, what time is it? 10:30. Awesome. Well, I still have time. If you guys do, I have nothing planned for for tonight. So, oh, excuse me. So yeah, that's kind of a portrait mode shot. It looks all right. And this was kind of a similar shot, just some different framing. Nothing that great about this shot. This one, his eye is even more out of focus, so I would probably consider this a throwaway. I think there was a Humvee right here. You can see there's another Humvee right there. Let's see. I like this shot. I think this guy was reloading. I'm going for another magazine, but let's play with this one a little bit. Straighten it out a touch. Bring the focus. I'm not worried about his boot. I can crop off his toe a little bit. I can see that's a boot. I'm not too worried about it. Bring up that exposure about a stop. That looks good. But then bring down my reflections a bit. A little bit of that shadow detail. There's some nice detail in his M4 right there. Do that little bit of contrast. Looks good. Looks good. I'm going to bring down my highlights a touch more. And then, there we go, add that contrast in. And then, it's okay that I'm not seeing everything in here. I've noticed I never really like cranking my shadows like that. It looks unrealistic. And there's always a little bit of mystery to the shadows if you leave them a little bit dark, which is okay with me. And that looks pretty good. There's my before. There's my after. Again, just super quick contrast edit. Getting that exposure right, getting that contrast right, getting those details right, and just doing this over and over again really helps you get down the basics of editing so that when you come down to more complicated imagery, you just kind of buzz through it real quick. So I can buzz through a bunch of portraits real quick just because I've edited thousands and thousands of images just like this, where I get my main selection down and then just buzz through the edits. So, glad you guys are... Oh, wow, 2:30 a.m. That is, oh, man, you got to get some sleep. 2:30. It is 10:30 p.m. right here in Colorado on Mountain Time. But yeah, I really appreciate that you're here so late. That is super late. I can barely stay awake until 2:30. And here we go. This image is nice and sharp. I think I shot this on, 200. Shot on a 70 to 200 at f4, 500th of a second. See the raindrops a bit there. Again, we're going to do some very minor edits. Everything that I copy and pasted looks good. Bring up our whites. Whoa, that's way too much. And then again, I think I used this image in my tangents video. Because again, you can see his circular helmet bumping right up against that line. So what I'm going to do is come in and crop his helmet a bit. I like that looking space right there. This negative space just kind of gives him kind of something to look at. I want to bring a little of this detail back, not too much. That's okay. I remember I had some difficulty editing this image for some reason. But that's not too bad. Again, before, after I shot this, probably a half stop under. I think that's just because I didn't want to raise my ISO too high. But that looks pretty good. I'm going to copy over these settings, move on to my next image. All about that quick contrast. That's a little bit hot. Let's bring that down. Much better. You can see he was leaning out a car door. So right now I'm using this buffer 2 and the upper receiver of the M4 to kind of straighten this image out. And I'm really going to crop this guy in. Put his eye right on that third. Again, that line right here intersecting with the edge of the frame. I'd rather crop it out so I'm not getting that tangent right there. That looks pretty good. Looks nice and sharp. Now I'll start playing with my contrast. And I'm going to turn down my shadows a touch because I'm okay if this goes black. That negative space is all right with me. Turn down my blacks. Turn up my contrast. I did lose a little bit of shadow detail. I like seeing these scratches in the M4, but I think that is pretty good. As you can see, I did miss focus a little bit on the eye, but I think my focus ended up being, probably my focus box was right here on the nose, and I missed it just a little bit. But at a quick glance, I think it looks okay. I think it's still a cool shot. Excuse me. But yeah, I will admit, when you're shooting fast, you do miss focus sometimes. But yeah. Oh man, 230 there. Yeah, I'm probably going to edit. I probably won't edit for another hour, maybe another 45 minutes. Kind of burn through some of these images. I think I like doing just these basic edits sometimes. It's nice when you don't have to go through and do a bunch of crazy post-processing. You can just, just do the basic editing, and that really teaches you, or it's taught me how to do shoot fast but shoot accurate. Always trying to, all of my images are within, my histogram, and I don't have time to be, chimping or looking at the back of my camera to see if I'm, getting the proper exposure after every shot. I kind of just have to eyeball it, know what all my settings are doing, and be able to work super quick. Because these guys aren't going to stop for you to, take their photo. They have a mission to do. They have things that they need to get done. Here's one of my favorite images coming up. Excuse me again. But like I said, these guys don't have time. This is a little bit hard to see in this shot. This is a mounted 240 gunner on the top of a Humvee. There's a front shot. But I thought it looked really cool shooting kind of his profile through this window. Let's get that contrast in here. There we go. And this is one where I will use the clarity just so I can make him pop out, and a bit of dehaze. There we go. I really wish this one spot right here wasn't right in front of his eye, but not much you can do about that. I'll just play around with these settings. I want to make him pop without making this image look like it's way over edited. That's a little bit better. Again, it is all just a big game. There we go. That's not too bad. Again, there's my before. There's my after. I'll go in. I'll do a little bit of detail sharpening up in the eyeballs a little bit. Make sure I'm just getting his eyes and not getting the noise. There you go with this. Now you guys can see all these water droplets that were getting in my way, and I don't want to sharpen those. I want to sharpen, there we go. That worked to sharpen the eyes a little bit. Do a touch of noise reduction right there. And that looks pretty good for just, again, a quick shot. When I would publish, yeah, I totally know how it goes. When I do like a portrait shoot and I go out especially like a neon light shoot. I'll shoot, 300-400 images, come back, and I won't edit those for like a week or two. And then when I do, I like going through and doing, like the frequency separation and some of that retouching on a lot of individual images. And that gets difficult. I know there are people that spend hours, and I do this as well. I try not to spend more than like an hour on a photo. I try and edit it as quick as possible because, if I have 10 images from a shoot that I want to publish, and usually I'll only end up publishing like 3 to 6 to fit on, an Instagram timeline, or 3 for a Twitter post at most, usually. Going through and spending all that time after you've already shot and downloaded your images and all that stuff, that time just feels like it adds up so quick, and I end up forcing, or that forces me to procrastinate. And when I'm procrastinating, I throw it off, and then you got people asking you, where's the shoot at, and all this other stuff. It just makes it super hard. So that's why when I was starting out doing portraits, they would be a lot more natural, and I wouldn't do a whole bunch of that like frequency separation and stuff like that. I kind of went a little more towards the journalistic side of things and just did basic kind of contrast edits. But now, as I'm starting to get more work, I don't really have that option. I have to kind of, that actually looks really good in black and white. I might leave this one in black and white. And then there's 240 or 249 right there. Get some of this contrast. Yeah, I like that. This was one of my buddies I went to school with. We went to our NCO leadership school together. Here we go. I like this shot as well. Just kind of hanging out here on the ground with the machine gun. And that contrast back. Very small hint of clarity. A little bit of vibrance for the uniform. Bring that exposure back. And then just bring up the shadows. There we go. Just a quick contrast edit to make it pop. So here we go. Here is going to be the last little set of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 photos. It's a helicopter security mission we were flying. But yeah, I absolutely agree. It takes forever just to edit a couple photos, and it's hard because when I'm doing portraits, like my neon portraits, that's on my time after work. So I go out, I do this during the day, all day long, however long it's going to take. It might take a couple days. And then I'm, at home on my time. Whoa, too much. I do like, look at all that detail in here. I think this is with the D5. I like that just a little bit of that highlight slider brings back those blues. You can even see it in his visor too. Looks kind of neat. There's a little bit of detail I do want to bring back. Mostly just some of these words right here. There's pull, emergency exit, and stuff like that. I don't need all of these details, so I don't need to crank my shadow slider all the way. Just a little bit. Sometimes it's a balance of knowing, what's too much and what's not enough. So there's some basic contrast. I'm going to play with those highlights a bit. This was pretty much, I think I had my camera just kind of sitting on my lap looking up at this guy. He's got a super cool mask on, these dudes that fly in these helicopters. A little bit of vibrance. Again, my basic edits, I'm pretty much staying in this basic window. Whoa, I don't like that. Let's try Adobe Vivid. Yeah, that looks good. So again, before, after. It's subtle, but at the same time, it's a bit big difference. Like, I'm not doing too much, but just these contrast edits make a huge difference in bringing these raw images to life. So that looks pretty darn good. I just dropped my stress ball. And my coffee, I believe, is getting cold. It's not too bad. But yeah, it looks pretty good. This was one of my favorite images. I won an award with this photo, just an Air Force award. We compete against our other photographers, but it really brought down highlights with that. We were just landing, and this is from the inside of the helicopter, and you can see all the rotor wash, kicking that snow up. Here we go. Here's one where I will bring back, I'll bring back these shadows, because this is an important detail, and the detail of the snow, because you can see the before, I can't see any of that snow. This is just such a contrasty shot, but with the dynamic range that the D5 was capturing, I can bring this back to what I actually saw. And I'll straighten this image out a little bit. Bring this down. Again, you can see this coming up to a point right here and kind of pointing towards this edge. I just broke that tangent right there. Add some contrast. A little bit of color and coolness to his uniform. Cool this image down a little bit because it was freezing. And then a touch of clarity. More than a touch. So you can see now I'm bringing out the snow that was stuck in our shadows. There we go. So now it looks nice and cold because it was freezing. A little bit of that texture. And I'll do the same thing with our detail. My big thing is I can't see the eyes, so I have to make sure the face mask is nice and sharp. I'll go through, turn up our detail quite a bit. I know that's going to be hard to see with YouTube compression, but you guys should be able to see this pretty well with the masking. That looks pretty good. And a touch of noise reduction. And turn down this color noise reduction a bit. Makes your image a little bit mushy if you have that cranked up for no good reason. Let's see. That looks cool in black and white, but I think the color is important in this one. Yeah, I don't want to turn up my shadows again. I don't want this to look fake. There we go. That looks pretty good. That looks pretty darn good. I'm happy kind of right in between. Let me bring up drop my exposure. Bring up my whites a bit. And let's bring this up a half a stop. And then bring down my blacks. There we go. So we brought back that detail. Super simple edit. Again, all within my rules and regulations for editing. Just bringing it back to what I saw, because again, it's so hard to shoot in a dark environment inside this helicopter where there's no lights on inside this helicopter, but it's so bright outside that the outside's overexposed, the inside's underexposed. There's kind of nothing you can do except for, it's like bowling. You shoot right down the middle and you hope you hit something. So here is one of the helos we were flying next to. I don't really like this shot because I cropped the top of the rotors off, so I might as well go all the way like that. And then the landing pads almost look like here's the horizon right here, and the landing pads look like they're hitting the horizon. Again, one of those kind of tangent things. So there's not much I'm going to do with this image. I like it because it's a close-up. you can see pilot, pilot, all the guys riding in here, and you can actually see my buddy Vernon right there with his D5 or D4 I believe, as well. And I think I shot this on a Nikon D610. This was back in 2017. This is January 25th, 2017. But yeah, you can see the other photographer and the other helo photographing our helo, which is kind of neat. Yeah, really bring back that contrast there. Again, a touch of clarity, a touch of dehaze. And then if I wanted to spend like an hour on this image, I would go through and clean off all these little dust specks. When I initially did that, or when I initially edited this image, that's what I did. I cleaned off all those dust specks. I'm not going to do it now, but that's as simple as using this little dust removal tool, spot removal tool. And that looks pretty good. Just that, a little bit of pop to the image, contrast, a little bit of color. That looks good. And this is a slightly better image. Straighten out that horizon a touch. Crop the back end of this photo. And I'm going to throw this guy kind of on an upper third and give him some space to look like he's flying towards that side of the image. Looks pretty good. I actually want to straighten out this horizon a little bit more. Uh-oh. There we go. Straighten this guy out. Yep, I got it pretty darn close. Everybody's still doing good in the chat. And again, if there's anybody listening that is not in the chat, feel free to drop in, say hi, drop some questions. And again, it gets you some points towards that live drawing that's going to be coming up. Excuse me, not drawing. I'm going to do it kind of on a point-based system. So it's kind of just going to be like community points, like people that provide, feedback for videos, people that join in the live chat. I'm going to be doing a photo challenge pretty soon, probably next weekend or maybe the middle of next week. This coming up week, dropping the photo challenge rules and everything there. It's going to be a super simple photo challenge that everybody can do. But that'll have, points just for participating, and then maybe doing like a community comment vote for who has the best photo, or, that looks really cool. Nice and sharp. But yeah, sorry, I get kind of sidetracked as I edit and, as I talk to myself basically for an hour or two. So don't mind me. When I'm editing alone and not doing a live stream, I don't talk to myself nearly this much, I promise. Alright, that looks good, nice and sharp. I really love this image. That looks pretty good. I would like to print this image. There we go. Even out that helo a little bit, and then you can see we weren't that high above, maybe 100 feet above the ground. I'm going to copy and paste these settings because I see I have a couple more helicopter images. And just like I was saying before with this one, what I would do if I were going to print this image, I'd go through, remove all these dust spots. I've done that once before, and it is a bit of a pain. I like this Dutch tilt that I did here. It's a bit of a pain, so I'm not going to do that a second time, but let's see, here's some of the wavy hills of North Dakota, but for the most part, it's pretty darn flat. I was catching the bottom of the window right here. I'm going to crop that out. I'm going to straighten this out a little bit. I'm going to straighten the tail of the helo, but what I don't want to do is I don't want to completely I took this on an angle for a reason when I was shooting it, to add some like dynamic movement to the frame. Because when the ground's flat and the helo is level with the ground and you're flying next to him, there's not that much, it's super cool flying in a helicopter. So sometimes just adding that little bit of an angle makes it look kind of cool and just adds some, forces some motion into the image, because when you're flying next to them, the only thing that's moving in relation to you is the ground. There we go. Touch of, now I don't want to add too much dehaze. I don't want to make the ground look dark because it wasn't. But this is again hard because look where my histogram is. I have all this bright and I have all this. I really don't want that overexposed, so I'll bring down my highlights. But it's hard because these helicopters are very dark green. Again, you can see helicopter. Let's see, I think that was Vernon there. I think that's Pete right there. Bunch of noise, but like I said, the helicopters are super dark. And I don't want to bring up my shadows all the way and look super fake. But it's that fine line of your shadows and your highlights. And I think that's about all I can do for this one without making it look like it's an HDR image. And there's the before, there is the after. But there's not too much. Again, this was shot on a D610. Did not have the best dynamic range. If I was shooting this on my D5, I would have been able to pull back some of those, highlights. Yeah, no, I wasn't saying I was just talking to myself. I just meant that I didn't look at the chat for a little bit, and I just kind of keep going sometimes, and I forget the chat's even there, and I just kind of start talking to myself. Let's see. Yeah, so the best way I can describe flying in a military helicopter is like riding a washing machine. It's, bustling you around, and every little bit of turbulence just kind of jostles you around. Yeah, here was my house. I had a huge backyard. That looks kind of cool. I actually think I'll do a video on this eventually. I think I'm going to get a print. There we go. That white balance was better. Because my house was kind of a beige color. But you can see here was my fence behind my house, and we would get these huge snow drifts, and my dog would just, I think those were my footprints chasing after my dog, but it's hard to see right here. I'm actually going to zoom in a little bit more. Let's try 2:1. Yeah, so these are my dog's footprints because she would just walk straight over the fence with all of that snow. So, yeah, good times. Bring down those highlights. I might crop this edge in a little bit because I think that was kind of like the side edge of the window. I really like this photo though. Straighten out that street. My heater is making some weird noises. I always have issues with some weird background noises during my videos. Now it looks like I did a tiny bit of editing to this already before I started the video. Oh, I gotta crack my neck. It's been killing me all day. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Before and after, just adding that little bit of warmth to make the snow have a little bit of, the sun was bouncing off the snow back into my lens, so a little bit of contrast. Look at how deep the snow was right here. These snow piles were probably about 4 feet high. Here we go. You can see it really well right here. This is like a 4-foot tall fence that would come up to like my mid-chest. And you can see the snow right here just goes right through this fence and almost right over. Like if these people had a dog, which they might, I can't remember these neighbors right now, but your dog can just, walk over your fence. And same thing right here. The snow just goes right over this fence. So here's, 4 feet of snow. And so this is also what the back of my house looked like. And we had snow all the way up. There's a little light right there. And I have a photo of it somewhere. I can't get to it right now. But again, there's 4 or 5 feet of snow drifts. And that was just a total pain. Here is a B-52 bomber. And I love these guys. I'll crop this in, straighten them out a little bit. We were flying over the runway and the flight line. These guys are just huge. You can see the maintenance guys working on here. You can see the red restricted area line around the B-52. Again, this was a little bit hot, but I can. There we go. I can bring these details back. Not quite clipped, just a little bit hot. There we go. Hint of clarity. Hint of that dehaze. Kind of works like mid-tone contrast. Now crop in a touch. This is another one that I would love to get printed, just because I spent so much time working with these and flying with these B-52s. I really want to get one of these images printed. Again, as you can see, I just keep going back to the same tools over and over again. Even when I'm doing my portrait editing, it's the same tools I keep using. Excuse me. Same basic tools. Kind of like a giant hammer, because they get the job done. They're kind of my go-to tools. Straighten out that fence line. I think it looks alright with the bomber on an angle if my fence line is fairly straight. That's if I decide to keep the fence line, which I might not. Just kind of crop it out right there. Now I think that fence kind of grounds the image a little bit. Hey Shane, what's up? Glad to see you here. Yeah, so I was lucky. I had actually these were 2 houses combined. So let me go back to this image if it loads. Yeah, so for example, this right here, just this little area is the house. This was like a 2-car garage, and this was somebody else's house, and then this was their garage right there. So you only really get this much space, which was a living room and 2 bedrooms upstairs and a kitchen. They were pretty big. They're meant for families. And I just had myself in there at the time. But I think that image is good. Again, quick before. That was about 2 stops overexposed. So I was lucky I got the highlights back in that one. Before and after. It looks pretty good. Now I know this one was overexposed because we had the same issue of, overexposed outside and underexposed inside. And I'm trying to see if I can see myself. Yep, there I am right there in the reflection. What did I shoot this with? Looks like a 2470. Nope, 70 to 200. All right. 2470s are just great workhorse lenses. Just get the job done in almost any situation. There we go. Really crush those shadows down. Straighten this image out, and you can see another helo. It's kind of a distracting little caution sign right there. I don't think I need it. I don't want to crop the rotor or the landing pads off of those rails. Hint of contrast, yep. Bring back a little bit of shadow detail, not too much. A lot of haze going on right here. And this right here, you can see this is just that's gone. It's clipped, but I'm going to bring it down regardless. I know it's not salvageable, but at least if I bring down my highlights a touch, that's better. When I bring down my highlights a little bit, it's a little bit less distracting versus just having a giant blown out image. That looks pretty good. I'm starting to kind of like this Adobe Vivid color profile. I'm going to hit V real quick on the keyboard. I like that in black and white, actually. Color really wasn't adding anything to that shot for me, and we're actually on our last image here. So as you can see with all of these, we started out at the end and we worked our way to the beginning. So you could see this was us in the helos. This was us preparing to take off. And again, this was before takeoff. I still have probably, 400 images from this shoot that you guys didn't see. Yeah, look at this, kind of a silhouette. I'm going to push this into a silhouette if I can. But there's a lot of images, like I said, you guys didn't see, so plenty more for future videos. And this was just, 2 or 3 of, hundreds of missions that I've done. So I've plenty of content, and I'm still doing stuff, every week. I'm not so much a, on the ground, day-to-day photographer as much as I used to be, hands-on with the mission. I do a little more, yeah, that last shot I cut out a lot of the haze. Yeah, I would love to see, airsoft is good, real good training for when it comes to like combat stuff. We do a lot of, exercises and practice before we actually, deploy and go places because, just getting to learn the team that you're working with is super hard. So, you're not getting shot at, and the proper times to, get behind cover, get out of the way. And I'm gonna make a video on it pretty soon. But just some of the different aspects of being, a military photographer. It's a lot different than just kind of walking out in the city streets and, New York City, for example. There's so much more that you have to be aware of and have that situational awareness of everything that's going on around you. So you don't, get shot or get run over by a truck or get run over by an airplane or, get your head chopped off by one of these rotors or fall out of a helicopter. There's just so much going on that I'm going to cool this down. Oh, not that much. This is my buddy Pete walking over. I think he's got a D5 down there. And I think he had an Osmo as well. But yeah, I'm going to make a whole video on that, kind of talking about what it's like, the details of being a military photographer. Not everybody does the same missions. We're not always out shooting missions. Sometimes, we're stuck behind a desk answering emails for a couple days or a couple weeks in between a mission. Sometimes we're, working in a studio doing official military portraits. We do all sorts of stuff. Sometimes we're doing crime scene photography for things that happen on the installation. Now, what was I looking for? Why do I keep hitting that? There we go. I'm going to add a slight vignette to this. There we go. I like that. Just a touch. Yeah, see, that's not too bad. Kind of a silhouette. It was super bright and super overcast. And again, the helos are dark, so they already had kind of a silhouette going for them. I just want to bring out some of that detail of the snow and emphasize the effect. I got to be careful. I don't want my guy, glowing black. And sometimes that happens when you're messing with clarity. You got to be very careful with clarity. There we go. Just that nice pop of contrast, getting some of our detail back. I don't want all of our detail back. I actually might bring up our shadows, in this case, to lose detail. Or brighten the image up a bit. There we go. I like this image a little bit brighter versus darker because obviously it was pretty darn bright out with the sun coming here. There we go. I like that. That's not too bad. I can deal with that. So yeah, those were some of my favorite images that came to mind when I was scrubbing through my hard drive. But yeah, it all right, man, peace out. Thank you so much for hanging out for 2+ hours. Really appreciate it. I'll hopefully do a live stream again, maybe next week. I'm working super hard this weekend to try and get ahead on a couple videos because you never know when you're going to get sick, because obviously last live stream you were here, I was super sick, and just trying to do a live stream that week to make up for the video that I couldn't shoot over the weekend because I was just so ridiculously sick. I'm lucky I didn't get the flu or anything, but I was just a whole mass of, getting food poisoning and then getting a sinus infection, then getting a cold all at the same time. It wasn't fun. And, that stuff happens out of nowhere. And in case if you don't have like 3 or 4 videos already made, you're kind of SOL when it comes to, getting your video out for that weekend. So I'm going to go through and just make some minor tweaks to a couple of these images. I think I'll keep going for maybe another 15 or 20 minutes. But we had a pretty good live stream. I think we covered basically all of the images here that were in my thumbnail. So now I can say that my thumbnail definitely was not clickbait. But yeah, Shane, you missed a little bit of the intro. And then anybody else that's just now, I got a couple other people in here. I was just going through and again doing minor contrasts, but kind of basic photo editing, but it's stuff you need to do if you're shooting raw. Because there's my raw image, and again, properly exposed, it's just very bright out because everything is here. I have my highlights in my highlight area of my histogram, and my shadows are in my lower left part of my histogram. Nothing is clipping on either end. It's just a bright scenario with the sun was over here. It was still pretty early in the morning. I think this was probably like 7, 8 in the morning. The sun was just rising, so it was between the horizon and the clouds, so it made the snow super bright, and the light was bouncing back and forth between the snow and the clouds, and the sky was bright, so just a bright scenario to be shooting in. And I'll kind of re-skim through some of these. This was me getting lifted up into a helicopter. And then this was me once I had gotten up to the top of the helicopter. And this is me below the helicopter after rappelling back down, which is pretty cool. This is the team that I was working with. Again, out in the snow, having to do all this and being cognizant of, where the helicopter was at, where these guys are at. I'm going to have to do some chromatic aberration removal on this. I'm going to have to do it manually because this is pretty bad. Oh, there we go. It looks like it kicked in for me. Awesome. That's much better. It looked really bad. It didn't look like the auto removal was working, but I guess it did. Let's see. Yeah. So yeah, it's fun. This the military stuff is my, full-time #1 job, so my YouTube channel comes secondary to that. So I do all this stuff. I shoot what I can, get everything cleared, everything that's unclassified cleared for release, get it published, and then everything that's cleared for release is stuff that I can, share on my YouTube channel, with everybody else. And then I do this, in my spare time once I get home or, on the weekends. I just do this for fun, trying to kind of give back to like the photo community that, the military, I came into the military knowing how to shoot already, because I did wedding photography and senior portraits and stuff like that, and just kind of picked up some skills, did a lot of learning from other photographers on YouTube, and I just kind of want to be one of those people that gave back. And I have a unique kind of situation. There's not many, I don't know any other military photographers that are on YouTube, or that are giving back in ways other than, a couple workshops. There are a couple military photographers that do like the Eddie Adams photojournalist workshop and stuff like that. But like I said, nobody really on YouTube. So I just wanted to try and find a place where, that looks pretty good. It's one of my favorite shots from this shoot. Actually, I think the next one. Yeah, this one right here, because I said you could see. There we go. It needed that little bit of contrast. And maybe a touch of a crop. I'm going to move the helicopter towards the back of the frame. Center it up a little bit more. That looks good. But yeah, this is just something I like doing in my spare time. If people like to follow me, that's great. If not, that's cool too. I just kind of like giving back, and whoever can learn a thing or two, just makes me feel good that I can give back. Oh man, way too late to be drinking coffee, but oh well. Keeping me awake. So yeah, if you can, you got any questions or anything, feel free to ask. I'm just gonna keep buzzing through these guys. Just for funsies, I might throw a couple of my presets on here. Let's go. A couple of my RunNGun presets. I just want to see what these look like. Probably gonna make these images look like trash, but that's okay. Yeah, dark and moody preset doesn't look that great. I made a second one. That looks okay. That's whatever. Let's try this orange and teal. It's probably gonna look like garbage. Oh yeah, that looks like hot garbage. I would never show that image. We'll just pretend like that didn't happen. Let's go over to this image. I haven't edited this one yet. I just want to see what this dark and moody looks like on this image. I'll try one of these two. Come on. Yeah, that looks like garbage too. Alright, we're going to pretend like those presets didn't happen, because they look like trash. But yeah, I think I'm going to get a couple of these images printed, and then I have behind the scenes footage of, yeah, this whole helicopter photo shoot, this whole 9-line mission, an extract survival training mission. I have behind the scenes footage of all of this, so I'll put together a video and do some more editing of this and kind of show what it was like to actually be in this environment shooting in these conditions. It was a lot of fun. Again, I think I showed this one. This was me getting hoisted up into the helo. Just super fun stuff, working with these tactical guys and, embedding with their team to make some cool stuff happen, and obviously make some kind of cool images with them. I don't have any video footage of this convoy transport training mission, but I do, like I said, I want to get a nice print of this. This is one of my favorite images from this shoot, and just that hint of contrast just does so much. It makes these Makes these reflections pop. Oh, this guy didn't tie his shoes very well. His boots are coming untied. I really love all these little raindrops here. Oh, that was a nice raindrop. Look at that sucker right there. Raindrop, mid drop right there. There's one pretty big one back there. That's pretty cool. And then the water's so deep, there's waves in the water back there. There's a cool little raindrop. Like telephoto macro photography here. There's a raindrop. That's just neat. I think this would look really good in like a 24 by 36 print. What's my crop? 2 by 3, I think. What is my crop? Yeah, it's 2 by 3, so 20 by 30, 24 by 36, same thing. Just about. I really want to get this in a print. Maybe do an episode on it, who knows. And then one of these helos and this bomber as well. But yeah, that's really so I have a video of that first and that last mission, this helo security flight, missile field security flight that we did, and then this winter survival extract training that we did. Those were the biggest things, and I think those would make good standalone videos. And again, I definitely want to get into more of this, military photo stuff, because I mean, that is my full-time job. YouTube, again, is just something I kind of mess around with on the side. Okay, hopefully the quality of this isn't too bad. Let's check stream health. Nah, whatever. I'm getting a warning every 10 minutes that my computer's choking on Lightroom, but whatever. But yeah, I think that is basically all I wanted to show in this live stream. Hopefully everybody watching learned something, and I hope this was somewhat helpful, and those people that are rewatching it, if they've made it this far, once this has been processed and uploaded, hopefully they enjoy it. Tomorrow I will be hopefully, if the snow dies down a little bit, I will be out shooting some time lapse on my Z6, and hopefully shooting on my drone a little bit as well, up in the mountains. If the snow dies down, I can travel up there, working on a cold weather photography kind of tutorial video, doing some mountain landscape tutorial kind of stuff like that. And then Sunday I will be dropping my GH5 versus Z6 video, and then hopefully a photo challenge video pretty soon. So that is kind of it for this live stream, I think. Shane, if you got any more questions, or if anybody else has any more questions, I think I'm about ready to go to sleep. It's 11:30 here, Mountain Time. And yeah, I think that was a good stream. But yeah, that is my that's my photojournalist workflow. And I've already gone through and I've culled a lot of these images down to, like I said, I shoot maybe 1,000 images per mission. Sometimes, 200, sometimes 500, depends how long it is. And then I have to chop. Ultimately, with this, like military photography, my goal is to get it down to my best, like 5 to 10 images. Like, how do I tell the story of what happened throughout this entire mission, throughout the entire day, in no more than like 12 images tops. Sometimes, if it was a multi-day thing, maybe a couple more, maybe 13, 14, but still, there's a way that you can tell a story in less images, and it's like writing an essay or writing a paper. You'd never write the same sentence twice, so you don't want the same photo, multiple of the same photo telling the same story. So it's ultimately, how do I get 1,000 images? And maybe I have to make a video on this too, of how I do my actual, because there's post-processing and developing your photo, and then there's editing all of your photos down to a manageable amount of photos. And in the world of journalism, editing doesn't mean, playing with the tones and the contrast and exposure of your images. In photojournalism, editing means chopping, the mass amount of images you have, like 1,000 images, down to, the 5 or 10 that you're eventually going to publish or are going to get published on a website, a magazine, Instagram, Twitter, whatever. But yeah, that would be kind of a cool video maybe of my process of how I go through and I flag my images, I star my images, categorize, put into collections, do colors, everything, to get those images culled down to 1% of what I actually shot. And again, you're only seeing here probably 1 or 2%, less than 1% actually, of what I shot from each of these missions, and try not to have anything overlapping. There's a couple of these where it's like I couldn't decide, this one looks good, but this one also looks good, and then it comes down to which image is sharper, which image has better composition, was the exposure slightly better in 1 or 2 of these images or one over the other. But yeah, so that's kind of my basic process of how I burn through images pretty darn quick. Edit as quickly as possible, because sometimes, most of the time, my turnaround time is a day. Like I shoot the mission one day, come back either that day or the next day, and then I have to have my images edited within 24 hours of when I return. So yeah, ultimately it does come down to, how do I take images that tell the story of what happened, and how do I put you as the viewer in my shoes, because I'm lucky enough to jump in one of these jets or jump in one of these convoys or helos or into this unit of guys that's getting dropped in the ground somewhere, who have a mission to accomplish, and it's my mission to tell their story and show what exactly happened with their mission. So it's an interesting job. It's something before I joined the military I didn't even know existed. So that's pretty crazy. Never would have ever thought this job existed before I joined up. It's definitely fun. Yeah, it has its deadlines, very quick deadlines. Just like somebody, at a news station. News journalists have their quick deadlines of how fast they have to turn a story around, is how we call it, or how we say that. Our turnaround times are super quick. So yeah, it's not just intense, actually shooting, being on the ground, doing the mission, and having that 360-degree awareness of, everything that's going on. But again, I'm going to make a whole video on that. It's been something I've been meaning to do for like 3 years now, just kind of almost interviewing myself, of what it's like to be a military photographer, and kind of my backstory of how I got that job, and some of the footage I've shot. I think doing kind of like a hype reel with all the cool footage I've got to shoot, and some of my behind the scenes stuff of some of my missions, and putting that all together into like a 10-minute little documentary about myself and what I've got to do as like a channel trailer. I think would be cool. Because like I said, I don't think there's really anybody else on YouTube that's doing this. So yeah, so this stream was like 2.5 hours. I think probably everyone that has been watching is probably sick of me at this point. But yeah, that's about it. Thanks, Shane, for stopping by, and thanks everybody else that dropped into the chat. Really appreciate you guys. And yes, here comes Noe. How's it going, man? Just about to cut the stream. Pretty much gone over everything that I need to. Yeah, Shane, if you don't have any more questions, sorry, Noe, that we're probably about to shut down in a second or two. Yeah, nobody really. We military photographers is a very, very small community. Um, I know, I know a couple photographers from Canada, military photographers. I know one from the UK, a couple from Poland. They're combat camera photographers. But even if you include all of the other militaries around the world, it is a very small field of, people that are in uniform that are, out shooting photos. So, yeah, that's a very small community. And yeah, I won't talk about our community too much. It's interesting. We have some interesting people. And we have an interesting, culture. We kind of have our own photographer culture that's a lot different from, people that shoot at Nat Geo or, portrait photographers like Brandon Wolfel or people like that. We're just kind of a strange, different breed of people because we're living that kind of that half of a life. We're only 50% photographer because 50% of my other time, like I'm right next to these guys, in my uniform with my flak vest and my helmet or whatever I have on with me, or my visor or my radio mic and all that other stuff. And I'm geared out, just like these guys, with a gas mask and everything else that I need to get the mission done. And then I have the added job of, taking photos of everything and, still surviving whatever's going on. So I'm only 50% a photographer, 50%, some dude in the military that's getting a job done. So yeah, I think that is probably a good way to end this live stream. Thank you, Noe, for swinging by. Thank you, Shane, for asking some questions and stopping by the live stream. I think that's a good place to wrap this up. I love doing live streams because they always give me ideas for new videos, and usually everything I can't answer in a video, I'll come up with 5 or 6 more video ideas for. So that, I think, is it for this live stream. We're just going to wrap up here. But yeah, crazy lifestyle. I will definitely get into that in more videos. I've been a little bit hesitant to do too much. I try and keep my, personal photography and work photography kind of separate. But the initial idea of this channel was to, kind of give a sneak peek into this life that nobody really sees. And I get to see some of the things that, even other people don't get to see, like the news reporters that get embedded with troops and stuff like that. They don't get to see all this behind the scenes stuff. So yeah, thank you, Shane. I will see you in the next live stream, and have a good night, or whatever time it is over there where you're at. But yeah, so to wrap this up, thank you everyone who joined, everyone who's in the chat. Don't forget about the 10K giveaway that's coming up. Most of that is going to be, I'll give away probably a couple Polaroid cameras in a live stream at some point. When I get to 10K, I'll probably do a big 10K video and give away, the last 5 Polaroid cameras in, like a live stream. But the other ones I'll be giving away based on, audience participation, community participation. And I'm coming up on 8K really soon. Oh, you're in Tennessee, so you're only a couple hours ahead of me, I think. So it's, oh man, it was at 1:30 where you're at, because you're East Coast time in Tennessee. I was in Tennessee not too long ago at Tyson McGee Air Base this past summer. But yeah, have a good night, man. Appreciate you stopping by. I don't know what I was talking about. It wasn't that important. We had the 8K. I'm going to be coming up on 8K, which means I will be giving away the first Polaroid camera in this whole contest. Oh yeah, get to sleep. I'm going to be getting to sleep pretty soon. It's super late. But for all of my viewers who are watching and, not in the chat right now, I'm including chat. I'm kind of tracking names as like participation points. So everybody that participates in the chat has a, yep, I've been there one time for, I don't remember what I went there. I think I did some social media training out there because I was running our Space Force Facebook and Twitter page for a little bit. Just one of the extra side things that I was doing, when I wasn't out shooting. But yeah, coming up on 8K pretty soon for the channel. So as a thank you, I will be giving the first Polaroid out of the 10 away in the 10K giveaway because I didn't want to wait up until, why wait to give all these 10 Polaroid cameras away all at once? Let's give some away as we go. So the first camera will probably be like first quarter participation on the channel, like everyone that's come by, joined live streams, participated in photo channels and stuff like that, or participated in photo challenges. So yeah, I'll have a photo challenge coming up pretty soon, and mixture of that and comments and all that stuff. I'll figure out, kind of the top non-spammy participants. I know I have a lot of people coming now that are just spamming for the sake of, spamming just to win a Polaroid, which I just trying to build, a community of people, not spam. So, yep, that is all for tonight. Good place to wrap up before I ramble on for another 20 minutes. Thank you to everybody. Let's call this quits while we're ahead. And as I end all of my videos, thank you guys for joining me. If you haven't yet, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you like the stream, hit that like button. And be sure to share this with someone you may think needs some photo editing help. Yeah, I appreciate you stopping by, Noe. Really appreciate it. Love having you in the chats. I always seem to be at work when you're doing a live stream, so I gotta try and catch one of your live streams again pretty soon. I think the last time I was trying to get in one of your streams, I think your phone died or something like that, like right before the screen was able to load. I think your phone died. But yeah, thank you everyone for joining. Had a great time. Thank you, Shane. Thank you, Noe. Everybody else. Everybody have a good night. Share this video with anybody you think might need some photo editing, little tips, tricks, pointers, stuff like that in Lightroom. And as always, until next time, get out and go shoot.